Anytime I talk about the problems with the BMI, the most common response I always get is, okay, well, what should we use instead? And the answer is nothing.
What?
Get rid of it and replace it with nothing.
Are you crazy?
So today we're going to react to another fat activist, and this one is interesting. The same person keeps coming up when I do watch some of these old 9-month ago TikTok cringe compilations of just fat acceptance, but this person is still around, and on top of that, I think there's some type of licensed therapist or health, something to do with health. They probably got like a degree or something. And this is their TikTok right here. So it's like, I don't know. It's like if you're supposed to be an educator or in that scene, and then you're using that power to promote your own thing or just have fat acceptance, it is really disturbing. Because again, you're telling people it's okay to have these problems and that it's not too much of a big deal. And on top of that, they try to downplay something they call fat phobia, or just skinny people in general. They try to make fun of people who are healthy and they don't like to be fat, and that just destroys society. You can even see her full body in some of these. She doesn't show it too often.
When I was still in,
so you could see that they're probably really insecure about that. I do think they said they had some type of like either back problem, or maybe they do have some type of disorder. But on top of that, instead of actually like trying to deal with it and stuff, they're just trying to accept it and allow other people to accept being humongous.
Work with clients on improving their relationships with their bodies, and I do this work with clients of all sizes, but the way that I do that work with clients of different sizes looks very different. But for thin folks, our work almost exclusively focuses on repairing the internal experience. There may be some light work on setting boundaries with friends and family about diet and body talk, but overwhelmingly the work is about allowing the individual to be free from the fat phobia they may have learned from external sources, but that they themselves enforce.
So I guess right there she was trying to say that we're conditioned, or we have something called fat phobia, which is like people when you don't like being fat or you don't like a fat person. And she's saying like if their client is not huge and they're skinnier, before they do anything else, they try to go in and try to tell them that it's okay to be fat, or you shouldn't be afraid of that whole aspect of somebody else being that. So she's pretty much trying to change their mind and condition their mind so that they can allow this whole fat acceptance. I don't know if this is with therapy or whatever she was trying to say, but it's like some sort of indoctrination. Like she just wants to change their thinking in order to see that client changed, which is weird. Like I don't understand how it's conditioned. I was saying this before, right? I think it's just a part of nature of us seeing how people being fat is bad, because it causes heart disease and a lot of bad problems. And on top of that, if you're playing sports and somebody's in shape and physically fit and they worked hard for that, and another person is huge, they're not going to perform well. They're not going to be as strong, most likely. Sometimes they could be a little bit stronger if they have a little bit more weight, but not if they're huge to where they can't move, they can't run, and they're out of breath all the time. So it's not something we learned. It's a natural thing of how being fat is really bad. What we don't talk about when we talk about fat. So let me just hear more about this.
Jordan, also known as Your Fat Friend, who is an incredible essayist, general writer, and podcast host of Maintenance Phase. This one is mandatory reading. Then we have Fearing the Black.
Yep, I heard of that book before. So they have a few books. I don't know if it's like they try to put it on the past or something like that. I think Fearing the Black Body was saying something about how they glorified fat women in the past, and they said it was like really good, and then now society's saying that being fat is really bad, so it was some type of social thing. But even in the past, right, let's just say this was true. Let's just say that people enjoyed being fat in the past. That doesn't mean it's good for our bodies or that we should socially accept it. Being fat is bad, period. You're supposed to be trying to get better and improve your life in every single area. And if beauty is subjective, then why should we try to make something that's bad for us beautiful? It just doesn't make sense.
Black Body, the
racial origins of fat phobia, which is kind of cringe. And then a few more. So they just have like a bunch of books too about fat activism and the real story behind America's obesity pandemic
by Charlotte Cooper. And this is all about the history and
And yeah, I mean, it could be cool to learn about history. Like, I don't see too many problems with that. The problem is, like, we have to learn from the past, and on top of that, even if the past is saying, okay, this is the reason why America's obese right now, this is the reason why people accepted being fat in the past, at the end of the day, being fat is bad, it's not good. So either way you try to twist it, it's still not going to be a good thing to try to accept being fat.
Thing that guys do when you can tell that they don't find you attractive.
Oh my god, the responses to this are all correct. And I have experienced all of them, like dudes ignoring you, talking over you, insulting you, making it clear that they don't care about your safety, every bit of that. But what makes it even more wild is that I would say that about a third of those guys, after doing all of that bullshit in front of their bros to make it clear that they're not attracted to you, will then find you in private or slide into your DMs and try to hook up. Because something that we don't talk about enough is that oftentimes when it comes to anti-fat bias, it is performative, because it's not only socially acceptable, but it's encouraged, and it can be a way of bonding between men. So men especially will often use fat phobia as a mechanism to gain social capital, regardless of whether or not they are actually attracted to fat people.
So yeah, I guess what she's saying here is that men can go and make fun of a fat person that either they're with or maybe they just know or something like that, and it's a way for them to bond or something like that. But I mean, if you weren't big in the first place, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be as made fun of as somebody who looked healthy or they were actually in good shape. Because if you're not fat, you probably have multiple options and you won't have to worry about just one man. And on top of that too, it's like I tell people this all the time: if you're fat, you should not be trying to get into relationships, because that just shows already that you don't care about your body. You're probably not going to care about the relationship, and on top of that, you don't look as good on the outside, so it's embarrassing to walk around with you. That's just reality. I'm not trying to, say that just to make her feel bad or anything. That's just the truth. The truth is nobody wants to be with fat people. So there's like somewhat truth to what she's saying, but she's using the fat phobia thing to kind of say like that's the reason why men are just bad in some areas. A lot of it just has to do with weight.
If you've watched any videos on my page, then you know that I use the word fat to talk about my own body and about fatness in general.
Yep.
And a lot of people do, because the word fat is a morally neutral description, just like tall or short. And the word fat has also frequently been used as a weapon of abuse. So a lot of people still experience feelings of pain and shame with it, which is completely understandable. Before I was comfortable using the word fat, I had a therapist who offered some alternative language for me to use, which I found to be very helpful at the time. So if you feel like you need a stepping stone for yourself, or if you need different language to use with people in your life who aren't comfortable with the word fat, feel free to use this. Another morally neutral way to talk about bodies is to talk about them in general descriptive terms.
So she's trying to say that you can use nicer words instead of just saying the word fat, because fat can be used as a way to be negative and put someone down. But on top of this, she used tall and short as kind of like the same area where fat can be. I understand, like, if it's for a man, if it's embarrassing to be short, you can't change that. But at the same time, if you're fat, you can change it. That's why it's like it's okay to, say being fat is bad, because that's like you can change that. If you go make fun of somebody and say like you're fat, like you got to change it. That's not bad, because they can change it. If you go up to somebody and say you're short, like you suck, that there's nothing you could do about that. So it's just gonna make you feel bad, and you have no way out of changing that. So if it's a changeable thing, then it can be used as a more derogatory term, because it could help people change from not being fat. So I don't think it should be in that category of just tall or short and that aspect, because it's something that you can change and something that you can better in the future.
This is just a gentle reminder for folks with eating disorders that you are not behind for struggling in your relationship with food. There is no timeline for healing, and you are not obligated to keep up with anyone else. Comparison doesn't serve you or your recovery.
So, not necessarily. I mean, in the competitive world, right? Let's just say I'm training for something. If I'm training for sports, I'm trying to get better than other people. I have to control what I eat, no matter if I have an eating disorder or not. I have to control it, or else I'm not going to perform the best, and somebody else is going to perform better than me and beat me in all the competition. So whether you have an eating disorder or not, you still are going to get punished for not being fit. And you kind of do have a timeline too, because if you have an eating disorder and you're like, oh, let me just accept it, let me just accept that I can't really deal with it as well as some other people, well, then that's when you either become too skinny because you're under eating, or you become too fat because you're overeating, and that leads to a lot of diseases and bad things about your body. So you are on a time limit and you are on a timeline, because if you don't change it fast enough, you're either going to get outperformed or you're going to die, because diseases are going to come with it. So I don't know, it just sucks that this person, right, it's like they're educated within like a field, counselor and educator, or they're just trying to like help people with things behind their back, under their belt, but at the same time they're promoting a lot of things that could help people stay in horrible shape. So it just sucks that we do have people like this in the world. But yeah, that's one of the fat activists that I've just seen a lot, and it is pretty cringe. But don't be fat.